First of all, welcome to the very first masterclass of the Allium Works Legacy Program. It is a new program that's been established where industry experts can give back by sharing their knowledge, ultimately to leave positive legacy for our future leaders in the rail and infrastructure industry, and also the construction industry too. Now, for our first session, it was only fitting that we had what we call the rail god, also known as Lindsay Holt, to kick off the session. Now, Lindsay does bring a wealth of knowledge, a lot of skills, and a long life passion for the rail industry. And for anybody that knows Lindsay will know and will also agree that he doesn't shy away from controversy. So this is an open forum. We're obviously going to be very respectful of each other. So this is not a slinging match. This is just a high-level information session. Now, I really believe that today's session, you're going to find some insight that you can absolutely go and take away. Now, in today's topic, Lindsay will do a deep dive into the requirements of the rail safety management plans. Now, this session, we're also going to be covering the need for safety management plans, getting a really acute understanding of when they are required and what do they entail, and also getting a better understanding of railway operations, understanding Section 62, and also doing a bit of a deep dive into Schedule 1 that covers that rail safety national law and national regulations. And then we're going to go into the safety management system arrangements. Now, the session is obviously recorded and we will make a replay available in the next couple of weeks. Now, one thing to remember, we only have an hour here together and it's near impossible to make an expert out of everybody in such a short frame of time. I wish we could, but we don't. We can't do that. But I really do encourage you, if there's something that sort of sticks with you, to go and further explore and to do your own due diligence before you start developing new systems and implementing those systems, because there would obviously be a ripple effect on your organization as well, depending on where you sit on the hierarchy as well. Now, if you do have questions throughout the whole session, please drop your questions in the comment box and we will do our absolute best to cover it in the session. For any questions that doesn't get covered here, if we're unable to answer it only because of time constraints, we will address that in the Allium Works Legacy Program that you're going to find in the LinkedIn group. Now, the LinkedIn group, again, is a free group to join. If we don't address your questions here today, only because we probably won't have enough time, we will address in that LinkedIn group in the next coming days or potentially a couple of weeks. Now, Lindsay, with that, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Anne. The first thing I just want to mention is rail safety is not safe working. Safe working is part of rail safety, but as you'll find out as we go through the whole of the presentation, there are requirements, but they're not in the degree that people know of. They've taken on a title as a rail safety manager or a rail safety mentor, coordinator, or whatever. Basically, they're safe working people. So, that's the first thing that we just need to clarify. The other issue that I just want to set out from the start is that I won't be talking work health and safety. I won't be talking principal contractors. They're not functions that directly relate to the criteria set out under the Rail Safety National Law. They have responsibilities under their own legislation, but it's not something that I want to split and say, this is what you have to do here for that legislation, this is what you have to do here for another legislation. I just want to purely concentrate on the requirements in terms of rail safety. In terms of a rail safety management plan, legally there's no requirement to have. Contractually, it may be that RIMS ask you to develop them. And as we go through the presentation and we get, to the last slide, you'll see the necessity in actual fact for having a rail safety management plan, because the plan needs to set out what you as an entity need to apply to the railway operations that you're involved in. It may not be your own system. So you're going to lose control of some of your systems, but you'll pick up control in other areas. That's sort of the opening gambit of where this starts. In terms of the Rail Safety National Law, and all I've done is I've plucked these out of the legislation. So David will be able to, quote these verbatim about what it is and everything like that. What I'm looking at is the fact that there are people who are involved in the construction of a railway tracks and associated track structures. There are others who are involved in the movement or operation or causing the movement or operation of rolling stock. They're primarily the ones who are captured in the requirements of what you need to develop in terms of a rail safety management plan. The construction of rolling stock, that's an issue that I do have with the regulator, because there's a lot of rolling stock constructors who aren't accredited, but that's a discussion for another day. So if you look and see which aspects of the railway operations that you actually get involved in, which says there that a person mustn't carry out the railway operations that I've just mentioned there, unless that person is accredited, is exempt under the law, is carrying out the operation of the person who is accredited, or also carrying out the operation for somebody who's exempt. Now, I want to just take the exempt quotient out of the argument, largely because the exemptions apply to private sidings. And there are a number of railways who also hold exemption, but they're the exception rather than the norm. So I want to make sure that we're talking about who undertakes the railway operations, who's required to have that accreditation, or are they actually operating under the accreditation of another rail transport operator. A number of years ago, I did a survey in New South Wales, and I actually found that 80% of the organisations who had rolling stock registered to operate on networks in New South Wales weren't accredited. Now, supposedly, by them not being accredited, they were operating under the accreditation of the network owner. Now, that then, and is still today, a fallacy that isn't applied as it should be applied in terms of rail safety national law. And it's something that I'll discuss later about how this whole issue is progressively being developed to draw those network owners out to show that they have to start applying their responsibilities in terms of the rail safety national law, and not let contractors or other organisations fill the void and carry out work that's not their responsibility. So very careful to know that if you're involved in rolling stock operations, you may need an accreditation, but it's not to say that you have to have it. But for operating that rolling stock, you must operate under somebody's accreditation. That is one area where you must have accreditation to operate rolling stock on a private siding, because although the private siding is exempt from accreditation, it's only exempt from the infrastructure parts of the accreditation, not the rolling stock operations.
So, Lindsay, if I may just jump in here. So when we say rolling stock operations, what exactly do we mean for the people at home or who might be new to the rail industry?
So rolling stock is basically steel wheels on steel rail. So anything from trains to trolleys. If you move or cause the movement of rolling stock, then there needs to be an accreditation that covers those operations. They're the discussions that are held. Well, we'll come to it later when we do the analysis with the RSMP guideline, but they're the very issues that are essential to get established between the organisation who may operate rolling stock or who may just be providing rail safety workers to carry out work on the infrastructure of a network owner. How do they all come into the various slots that they've been allocated in terms of roles and responsibilities under the Rail Safety National Law?
Okay.
So Schedule 1 of the Rail Safety National Law, national regulations, that sets out what the safety management system is required to have in terms of the accreditation that's required by the rail transport operator. It's listed as 30, but there's actually 29 elements, because if you take number 1, interpretation, out, that reduces it back to the 29 that everybody is familiar with. The requirements that are set out in Schedule 1 are very clear, they're very explicit. They basically tell you what is required in each element that is defined. That is what the safety management system that you will apply for the railway operations you're involved in will have to meet. Now, there will be parts of this that will be from your own organisation, but there'll be other parts from the rail infrastructure manager or another entity who may be facilitating some of the works on and around the railway.
So if I may, Lindsay, so if we look at the rail safety management system that you're talking about, so how many people or departments would normally contribute to the undertaking of preparing the system to that level of content? Because there's obviously a lot involved in developing that system. So who would be involved in that?
So in the development of that, that's where and it's an issue that I've raised, is that we would need qualified rail safety managers, people with the rail safety knowledge that can actually develop the systems. Now, when you look at the various aspects there are aspects there that aren't safety related. They're all rail safety related, but they're not safety related. Some of them are quality related, some of them are engineering related, obviously the security and various things like that. So the systems you'll find, if you're undertaking railway operations, the systems will be developed. So you're not having to develop the system. The accredited entity, in getting that accreditation, had to have those systems in place. And because the majority of the systems, and because the works, the railway operations you're conducting is being conducted under the network owner's accreditation, it is their safety management system that needs to be applied. So again, the network owner, they have to have systems to meet all the 29 elements. If you're a rolling stock operator who holds accreditation, to be able to gain that accreditation, you would have had to provide ONSA with the systems relevant to the railway operations that you're seeking accreditation. If you say, okay, I'm new to the industry, I'm coming in, I need to develop a document so that I can undertake railway operations, then you're starting at the wrong end, because the systems should already be done, because all of the work since 1993 has had to be done under somebody's accreditation. So what you at the other end, when you're at project work or for an organisation, and you may have come into that organisation, you need to work out, and this is where we go through later on in discussing with the rail infrastructure manager, okay, if we have to develop an asset management program, okay, we're maintaining your assets, so what is your asset management program? And the rail infrastructure manager would have to provide you with the documentation that you would then feed them by electronic means or technical reports or something that shows how you are maintaining their asset.
So you touched on the what we call the RIM, so the rail infrastructure manager. So can you just give us a bit of an explanation of that role? What does it entail?
We'll start with a rail transport operator. A rail transport operator can be a RIM, a rail infrastructure manager, or a rolling stock operator, an RSO, or both. What's necessary to determine is who has effective control and management of the operations or the assets that are required to be managed. If you're the rail infrastructure manager, then obviously you are the person or you're the body who maintains, manages, oversees the construction, development, and all of that of the rail infrastructure. So you would hold an accreditation as a rail infrastructure manager, which would be in your notice of accreditation in the first part that would say, okay, this is the infrastructure that you are accredited to construct, commission, maintain, repair, modify, decommission. And it would have listed down where the various aspects of the infrastructure are. Essentially, there is one RIM for the network. There are occasions where there needs to be an alternative RIM, but they would float in and out during the construction or maintenance works, or primarily the construction works.
So can you just give us an example? So who's the RIM in New South Wales?
So you've got four. You've got Transport for New South Wales, Sydney Metro, Sydney Trains, ARTC for the Defined Interstate Network, and UGL Regional Links for the Country Rail Network.
So how did you identify, so if a newcomer coming to the rail industry, how can they identify the delineation between those RIMs?
It's all defined in the legislation. So in the definition of the Rail Safety National Law, it has what is an RTO, what is a RIM, what is an RSO, and then it breaks down further into what's the role of the RIM, what's the role of the RSO. And if you want to check and see who is the organisation who holds accreditation, you can always go into the ONSA website. And one website that you need to be familiar with is that of ONSA. So if you just go into your search engine and you type in ONSA, you'll come up with Office of the National Rail Safety Regulator. Put your mouse over publications and there'll be a whole list of different issues that are identified in publications. Obviously the law's there, the fact sheets, guidelines, codes of practice, they're all listed there. And then you'll have rail accreditation register. So you open that up and there's the register of A to Z of, probably David can tell me better than I can, but I would guess somewhere around 185 or so organisations who currently hold accreditation. And then if you go into the register of exemptions, that'll have all the private siding owners, which again might have another 200 different private sidings that are registered across the country. All of the information is readily available. It's just a matter of knowing
finding it,
where to go to get to it. And the first point of call I would always go to is ONSA's website. And even if you do a search, register of private sidings or register of accreditation, it's all there.
So, and just for anybody that's watching the re-recording, we will make these links available in the Alien Works Legacy Program page on LinkedIn as well.
You've been absolutely correct in all you've said up till now. But don't forget Light Rail going through Sydney as well. They're another accredited entity in New South Wales.
Yeah, I mean, the more you think about it, the more they draw in every time. And I mean, Victoria now, they've now drawn in all of their light rail entities who weren't governed through the Rail Safety National Law previously. Mm. So it's always changing. That's why it's difficult just to simply say, here is what's needed, when you actually have to research and find out what actually is needed.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about Schedule 1. That sets out in terms of the law what's required, okay? Where you need to go to now is, again, ONSA's very helpful here. They've got a guideline, safety management system. What this guideline does is give the specifics of what ONSA is looking for and what it expects to find in a safety management system that is relevant to the accreditation that the rail transport operator has to have. Again, it's the accredited entity that must have that safety management system. It's not everybody who conducts work in and around a railway that needs to have that safety management system. They need to apply the safety management system where they're contracted to have to provide those services to a rail transport operator. But if they've got their own rolling stock accreditation, then obviously they have to have the safety management system to meet those railway operations. So a conflict comes in then is, okay, I'm a rolling stock operator, but I've got half the team out there doing infrastructure work for hypothetical ARTC. So hypothetically, half the railway operations are conducted under ARTC's accreditation and their safety management system. The other half is applied by the rolling stock operator, their accreditation and their safety management system. Now, obviously, two systems into one overall operations doesn't work out. Hence the reason, and I'll take you through in the next few slides, exactly how you overcome that. And then ultimately, that's the reason why you summarise all of that containment within the Rail Safety Management Plan. So if you look at, and this is from the ONSA guideline, you go into any of those elements, and if we say, take, for example, drug and alcohol, not that we should be promoting drug and alcohol, it's just a topic that is very
relevant.
It's just that it's an element that is very, very in conflict with what is applied as opposed to what is required to be applied, again, in terms of the Rail Safety National Law. It's the accredited entity that needs the drug and alcohol management program. The entities undertaking work under that accreditation need to apply the drug and alcohol management program. Now, if that drug and alcohol management program talks about testing of rail safety workers and various things like that, in New South Wales, that testing must be done by an authorised person. It's up to that accredited entity to determine how those authorised persons will be appointed and how they will undertake the testing in terms of that accredited entity's drug and alcohol management program. It's not up to a contractor to go out and do their own testing when it's not linked to any program. And again, that's the need to have that rail safety management plan that spells out the specifics of what's required. Because whenever you have a program, whenever you have a plan, there's always something that you have to do to provide information to somebody for whatever it is that you've done. So if you've done testing, then obviously, and somebody's breached, the rules and everything like that, there's no automatic reporting that now need to be done, but it needs to be done on a monthly basis to show that you've undertaken testing and these were the results and these were the outcomes and various things like that. But all in all, and again, I come back to the guideline. Actually, Richard, if you can go back up to element 15 in the guideline, it'll put some context into what I'm saying.
So let me pose a question to you, Lindsay, while we find that information. So I'm a small subcontractor. I've been contracted in by a principal contractor to come do...
Yeah, forget principal contractor. That was the whole point I was making up front.
Yep. I'm just trying to give you a scenario because this is what's happening at site at the moment. So small contractors are coming onto site working under the principal contractor who then works under another accreditation. But let's say I'm doing drainage work. My company is ABC Drainage. One of my guys has an incident and potentially 4 calls. Who's testing my person? Who's responsible to conduct that drug and alcohol testing on my drainage worker?
Well, the first thing I'd be asking, is that drainage worker a rail safety worker? If that person is a rail safety worker, then the responsibility lies with the accredited entity to oversee the testing and the processing of results for that organisation, because essentially they can't contract out their responsibilities. Mm-hmm. Now, unfortunately, they appear to have been doing so over a number of years, and entities with good intent have come along and they've picked up and overseen the actions that essentially are not theirs to apply. So herein lies the problem that as I go through the remains of session, that's when I'll bring out exactly how these issues in 2023, and it's very timely that we're having this session now, because I believe in 2023 there will be changes that will change the whole focus of how contractors are managed out there on the network.
In fact, it's very apt as Lindsay's just going to jump onto training and instruction now. One of the things which always bothers me is, and particularly from the big organisations, is how much training and instruction do they actually provide to the rail safety worker? Because the majority of people don't ever come into contact with the actually accredited organisation. And it's down to sub-organisations who hold accreditation, but not fully over what the worker may be undertaking is provided for them. So it could be a plant operator, and I go back to the situation what Anne said before, gets tested for cause, for a derailment or whatever it may be, and would never actually meet the accredited organisation because of testing regimes which are set up in between from various contracting parties. So how does the level of training and instruction roll down the hill so far to these minor contractors?
Agree, that's been a problem in the past. Hence the reason that in 2016, 2017, RSMP developed a guideline contracting the rail industry. What was evidence then, and is still evident now, is that rail transport operators, the RIMs of the world, have not met their responsibilities in terms of the Rail Safety National Law. So element 15 is all about the training and instruction of the safety management system. Now, they haven't been training and instructing people in the content of the rail safety management system relevant to the railway operations to be undertaken. Because of that, we have, through industry bodies and various other entities, been working closely with ONSA, who, and as I say, it's very, very timely, because as we're talking here today about what the requirements of the Rail Safety National Law are and what all the various processes and procedures and the 29 elements and effective management and control and all that. At the same time, or herein or hereabouts, ONSA is rolling out their education program to a number of the major network owners across the country. And being part of the discussions of how all that has evolved, it's interesting because what I'm showing you here now in this presentation and what I will lead to with the ONSA guideline and various things like that, is identical to what ONSA will be rolling out to those rail infrastructure managers. Now, in 2023, ONSA will go back to those rail infrastructure managers and they will say, well, okay, we ran through that education program back in the end of 2022. What have you actually done to meet the provisions of the elements that are clearly defined within the legislation? I mean, a question will be asked, well, why hasn't this been done before? I don't like to concentrate on what has failed or not been applied in the past. I'm looking forward to what is going to be applied in the future. And that is why it's essential that industry gets its information out there in regard to rail safety, as does ONSA to the RIMS to say this is what needs to be applied, so that when they come together with new contracts or whatever in 2023, there will be that defined process that it will show in the RSMP guideline exactly how you come to that determination, and it's then that the systems and the failings of the past will be able to be applied.
It talks about the rail safety worker needs to understand the roles and responsibilities as part of the RTO, RTO's SMS, and need to ensure the rail safety workers have got a good working knowledge of their SMS. I still don't see how an RTO is going to get that level of information down to the number of inductions that run through a major project.
So just add to that the fact that in terms of element 13, which is consultation, the RTO must consult with all parties who are going to be engaged in the railway operations and the safety management system that has to be applied. In discussing with one of the major network owners across Australia, they have already taken steps to move forward to develop training material that they have started taking all contractors through that will describe what the requirements of the Rail Safety National Law will need to be applied moving forward. So understand it hasn't been applied to date, but yes, it will be applied in future. Unfortunately, with their attempt to roll out the changes, they actually haven't captured everything that will be required to be applied. So there will be no doubt some explanations needed as to why their safety management system that they were taking the rail safety workers for subcontractors, sub-subcontractors, whoever through, only contain 12 elements. So they're the things that, as I say, in 2023, I'm hopeful that the failings that we've seen in the past will no longer exist. And the people who are involved and clearly undertaking the works will be doing so under an accreditation and a safety management system relevant to the railway operations they're undertaking.
So, Lindsay, and I look at how this can be managed, and will this become a competency underneath the rail safety, the equivalent of the RSI? Because there are so many contractors jump around the various major entities. So whether it be Metro, whether it be ARTC, whether it be Sydney Trains, whether it be Metro Trains, people are moving around so many times. So every rail worker is going to have to undertake this training in potentially 3, 4, 5, 6 different organisations. Who's going to do this? How is that competency and training going to be actually managed at national level?
Yeah, not managed at a national level, Clive. It'll be...
This is also who is instructing these guidelines. How are these people, how are these organisations and accredited entities going to manage this level of training? And is it going to be a tick in the competency box for all of these workers, just as it is for entering the railway? Because you have to have a competency to enter.
I suppose.
How is people going to know that you've actually been trained in this level of detail?
Clive, we just got David Cooper who wants to respond to your question.
Hello, Clive. I suppose that's a call to arms for me to respond to your question. So annually, ONSA have a programme where we visit all RTOs. The technical division have professional experts or subject matter experts who accompany rail safety officers from the operations. We undertake annual audits, and from that we determine that, certainly in my instance, that the RIM has the competency and capability to undertake the work. Now, part of that is that we will do a sample audit of the competencies held by the workers for the skills that are in their job description, that the training has either been in-house to an appropriate level or has been given by a rail training organisation. On a national level, there are some skills that just don't migrate nationally. However, at the moment, I know that the rail regulator, the safety regulator, is looking at a national competency for rail welding. So that's one entity. I should qualify, I'm a track engineer, I'm not rolling stock, so I can't speak in great detail about them. But certainly ONSR determines or assures competency is held for all tasks that an individual is required to undertake.
Yeah, so just in addition to that, David and Clive, what we're talking about here is that during the audits and inspections, compliance inspections that ONSR roll out, they will be asking specifically of the rail infrastructure managers, show me evidence of how you've provided the training and instruction in your safety management system to those people on your site. It'll be up to that rail transport operator to provide the information to ONSR to satisfy whatever the questions are that are asked. And it's just like any induction, you need that information to go to the people who are undertaking the work where it hasn't been applied in the past. And I don't see it as something that will be automatically rolled out in entirety, because obviously ONSR's got contract management as a focus issue. It's an alarm bell ringing to them that there's problems out there. We, as the industry, know there's problems out there. So it's how do we overcome those problems? The first thing is to get that training and instruction out there through the 22 network owners that are target to the campaign that ONSR will launch, and then move on from there, because there'll be different levels of compliance as to how this specific area, we're not talking workplace or work task competencies, we're talking about training and instruction of the safety management system. Unfortunately, the screen I've got is showing it's all fractured, but I understand what the document actually entails. If you go back to the start of the document and just scroll progressively through, I've got a hard copy beside me, which is just one of a number of documents I take to bed with me at night to keep reading and to keep active in this challenging world. But if you can get a copy of this document and work your way through it, it describes exactly what we've been talking about to get to that end result. It talks about principle of shared responsibilities and accountabilities, application to the principles to rail safety duties, because everybody out there has got duties. General duties, duties for RIMs, duties for RSO, duties for contractors, duties for rail safety workers. Obviously, it goes into the prohibition of contracting out, which is one area where a number of us within the industry has evidence and has quite seen clear examples where RIMs are just contracting out their responsibility to contractors. So we talk about principal contractors in the guideline, only to say that they have a different function outside of the function of another entity involved in railway operations. Their responsibility is the principal contractor purely in terms of work health and safety legislation.
In the duties, and this has always been something which has perplexed me, is in WHS we talk about designers, manufacturers and suppliers.
Yep.
And we could go on to contractors. But if we look at a plant company, a small plant company, and they go and buy an excavator and redo it and put it into high rail form, right? The excavator has been designed to a relevant standard in respect of digging and travelling and weight-wise and everything else. It then gets high rail wheels put on it.
Yep.
That organisation is not an accredited organisation,
No.
and yet can drive about up and down, and I won't say willy-nilly because there are rules, but can drive about on the network in given conditions, and they have no responsibility or duties when you look at this particular document.
No, you're not looking at the legislation. Section 53 places a duty on all designers, manufacturers, constructors, installers, the same as work health and safety legislation. So if they're involved in railway operations and they're involved in rolling stock, then obviously, although there's not the application of a manufacturer of high rail equipment to be accredited, in fact, there are track machine operators in Australia that aren't accredited. You look at Plaza and Harsco, you look at Aries, you look at all the RRB constructors, they're not accredited. Technically, what ONSA sees is the need that the processes that those organisations have will be picked up in the commissioning phase. So it's all of that that's there, again, falls under the accredited entity. And again, it's all to do with the contracting out responsibilities that will fall more heavily, hopefully in 2023, in the rail infrastructure managers having to meet all of the requirements for people who operate on their network. So just moving quickly through the RSMP guideline, it talks about the contract and the scope of the operations, rail safety work, contractors in the RTO safety management system. So here we're now getting to the stage where, okay, we realise there's two entities here who have their own safety management systems. So which system needs to be applied? And ultimately we come to part 3 of the guideline that actually lists all the 29 elements. And it says, okay, you as the RIM put down which elements you've got documents to support. Me as the RSO will put down the documents that we've got in place to carry out the railway operations. And then there'll be a determination of which system will actually apply. Now, obviously, there are systems that contractors and organisations have that they're their own system. I mean, it's their safety policy, it's their own internal communication, it's their own consultation, various things like that. So that will always be their own system, their auditing, their corrective actions, various things like that. The RIM will need it and they'll need to apply their own processes, but the RIM will have to make sure that to cover all of the works undertaken on their network, that is their drug and alcohol management program applied, it's their fatigue management applied, it's their competency management applied, it's their security management plan applied, emergency management applied, all of those key elements becomes that of the RIM, as opposed to those that are determined to be applied by what I'll call the other party. So by going through that, and that's what I say, you can't compile a rail safety management plan up front during the tendering stage because you don't know exactly what the specifics are that you're going to be involved in on the network or whose safety management system or what it contains or various things like that. So hence the reason that when that summary that's done in part 3 is finalised, the outcome of that is then included in each of the sections of the rail safety management plan, that if you show that, which I've provided an example of one that was developed, and it's solely a template, don't read too much into it, it's out of date, but essentially it just takes people through every element there, and you work from that determination that you had from the RSMP guideline to put into your plan the respective processes that will be applied relevant to the element of the safety management system. Now, I realise, Anne, we're almost out of time, so I thought I'd just quickly race through the last bit, knowing that there could possibly be questions coming, so just give everyone a chance to lob a few back at me and see what we come up with.
If I may just go jump in. So you talked a lot about what ONSA is going to be doing at the tail end of 2022 and feeding into 2023. So what can you tell us about some of their arrangement and what we can expect?
Well, their arrangements is basically running a number of slides. I don't know the final number. I've got an approximate number of the slides that they have that they will roll out to a number of the RIMs. It will contain basically not identical to, but very similar in detail to what I've just shown and taken you through today. So where I see the weakness now is for industry, because industry over years have been putting work health and safety people into a function around railway operations that have not been trained or have the knowledge or experience of what is required specifically in terms of the Rail Safety National Law to be applied. And I think the challenge for industry and a challenge for Alien Works and a challenge for Anne is to develop a program of training that can give people the knowledge to know that they could be doing this presentation and taking the people through exactly that same provision. At the moment, RSMP have put an online program out there, Introduction to Rail Safety. Unfortunately, it misses the mark. It doesn't address what the Rail Safety National Law or the education program being rolled out by ONSA will have. ONSA will, at the end of their education program, post their presentation onto their website, which will then give further substance of how we collectively can move forward and develop processes that can be continually rolled out to make sure that all sectors involved in the rail industry have the competence and capacity to know what it is that needs to be applied.
From your comments, and I saw Dave Cooper has come off mute. So Dave, did you want to add something to that, or?
The first thing I was going to say, Lindsay, that was an excellent presentation. There's next to nothing that I could challenge or contradict. You've got all your facts absolutely right. The only one that I did note, you said that rolling stock manufacturers are not accredited. That's correct, because that lies with the RTO. They have to assure the procurement of whatever infrastructure they're going to be running. So they're the ones that have the accreditation, not the manufacturers.
Yeah, there is only one problem there, David, is that the contractors who engage or procure the rolling stock from non-accredited third parties, they don't actually have accreditation for the construction of rolling stock themselves. Hence the reason that I believe it's gone over to having to meet the provisions under the commissioning program, not an accreditation, because there are very few contractors who actually have accreditation for the construction of rolling stock.
By contractors, what do you mean by that?
So if I look at Langerook, for example.
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
So they're accredited RSO. Okay, they're an accredited rim, but that rim's only for 150 metres of siding at Talara. So they're accredited rolling stock operator, but they're not accredited to construct rolling stock. And yet they'll go to Aries Rail, Harry Built, you name it, and they'll order equipment. They could go to Manco from New Zealand and say, okay, we want this high rail equipment to be, constructed. It'll be constructed, but it's not constructed under anybody's accreditation. The only time that the technical specifications are picked up is during the commissioning phase, which obviously you then have to go through getting that item registered to operate on a network that includes all the technicalities that the network owner have actually established.
Yeah, in the case of, the example you gave was Langerook, you're quite correct, but I know that the procurement of the NIF trains, for example, our major project section was involved through the manufacture of those vehicles before they were brought into Australia. So we do get involved in the manufacturing process to assure the quality of the construction. That was specifically through rolling stock, but you're quite correct, the likes of an entity that is primarily a RIM, they do not have accreditation for rolling stock manufacture. They should actually engage consultants or subject matter experts to assist them in that.
And that's where I put my hand up, David, and say I would love a time with some of these organisations to pick them to bits about what they're manufacturing, allowing to go out onto networks, I can tell you. But anyway, that's another.
Get yourself a good PR man. I'll have to leave. I've got another meeting at 3 o'clock.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very worthwhile, and I thought it was an excellent presentation. Thank you both to Anne and to Lindsay. Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks, David.
Thanks.
So I'm just going to wrap up there. So I just want to put it out to industry. Works is open to collaborating with industry to try and bridge this skills gap and this knowledge gap as well. So there was a couple of golden nuggets that we're definitely going to be taking away and working on that. And obviously working with some key stakeholders with that as well. Now, thank you so much for your time, Lindsay. It was very insightful. I'm pretty sure there's a few people sitting here rough scratching their heads going, where do we go from here? But if you do need any additional information, you know where to find Lindsay. Is available on LinkedIn. Also, please reach out to us on the Works Legacy Program. It is a free group that's been set up in LinkedIn. There will be a link to that in the comment box just now. So like I said, if there's any questions that you wanted to ask that we didn't address here, or if you just want to send it through, you can send that through to contact@alliumworks.com.au as well. And then we'll pass that on to Lindsay. But as always, thank you to everybody who attended. Thank you, Clive, for getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning there in Spain. I really appreciate that. And as always, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Lindsay.
No worries. Thanks very much. And anybody, just let me know any issues, any questions, any stories I have to make up to cover any gaps I might have missed.
Cheers, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay.
No worries. Take care.